Hey everybody, Lieutenant Joe Pangara here for the Blue Heart webcast. So what I want to talk about now is going to be probably a multiple part program. We're going to start talking about de-escalation training and some of the concepts that go into de-escalation training. Now, as a police officer, no matter what your position is, patrol officer, corrections officer, detective, supervisor, does not matter. De-escalation techniques can help you save your life, save the life of the people around you, and maybe slow down a potentially violent incident. All right. So it's a bigger process. So I teach this. I'm an FBI trained hostage crisis negotiator. I was blessed to be able to go to that training. I was on the county team for quite a while. I loved doing it. What I saw was a connection between my position as a detective, where part of what I had to do was get somebody to connect with me, trust me, and then tell me some horrible crime that they committed with the details. Well, as a hostage crisis negotiator, a lot of the same things are present. I have to connect with somebody. I have to get them to trust me, and I have to get them to tell me things. And my goal, though, one is to get a confession, and as a negotiator, is to get them to put down a weapon, let people out of the room, or to give themselves up, right? But you use a lot of the same techniques when we do this. So I think initially what we need to talk about is understanding what it means to be in crisis. So one of the reasons that we need extra training, and every agency should send every officer for this training, because it's always better to talk your way out of something than to have to fight your way out of it. Okay. We do this. I teach this program for schools, for school personnel, every single person in the building, and we call it Crisis in the Classroom. That's the name of the course. I also teach crisis in the business because people in business come across people, and everywhere we go, people can be in crisis, and there's all kinds of crisis. There's emotional crisis. There is mental crisis. There is drug, alcohol related crisis, all these kind of things. So one of the first things we need to do is recognize the reality that there's people having a bad day, and then there's people who are in crisis. And if we fail to recognize that what I'm seeing in front of me is not a bad day, is a person in crisis, then we can have bigger problems than you can imagine. Excuse me. So if somebody, say somebody you know, they come in, a coworker, and they come into the office and they walk in and you say, "Hey, good morning," and they snap at you. It just seems really out of character for them. You might say, "Hey, what's your problem today? What's going on?" Now, a person having a bad day would probably hear that and realize that they just snapped at people, and they might say something like, "Hey, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm having a bad day. I didn't mean to snap like that." Oh, okay. That's a bad day. A person in crisis is not going to respond the same way. A person in crisis, when you say, "Hey, what's the problem? What are you?" And they might bark back at you again. They might escalate the situation. See, that's how that works. You escalate the situation. So understanding when we're dealing with somebody, are they having a bad day or are they in crisis? And it can be a small crisis to a very big crisis. The next thing we have to understand is how does a crisis get started in somebody's life? Well, very often a crisis is a part of a ongoing situation in their life. They might be having problems financially, romantically, medically. Uh, they could be getting in trouble. There could be all kinds of problems that they're having in their life, and it's kind of long term, and it builds up and builds up, and it could be reaching to a crescendo. Think of a brother or sister officer who did something they shouldn't have done, whether it was on purpose or by accident, and they're in the middle of an internal affairs investigation that could lead to a demotion or a suspension or some other kind of penalty. That's a lot of stress in somebody's lives. And the closer it gets to a culmination where they could be found guilty of something, the more stress they would be under. Well, in people's lives, they can be under stress for lots of reasons. Any one of the things I mentioned. They can have a relationship going bad. They could have been betrayed. They could have a financial loss. They could have a mental problem that's building up. And crises come from all these places. Well, there is normally that buildup kind of a thing where it's building up, and it's going to a crescendo. Other kind of crises can be something that is an acute, very, very fast crisis. Say somebody lost a child in a car accident. You know, the kid was riding around. How many people do we know? 19, 20-year-old kids driving around, maybe not driving so safe, driving too fast, and they do something, they crash the car and they get themselves killed. Or they crash the car and a passenger gets killed. For that family, for those parents, for their brothers and sisters, people that know that person, that can put them into emotional crisis in an instant, and they can not be themselves, right? So we got to understand that. So the thing that usually starts a crisis that you would be involved in is called a trigger event. So we know a trigger on a gun. A trigger makes the gun function. You pull the trigger, and that starts the process of firing a round, right? So a trigger event is the event that set the person off on the road to violence. That trigger event can be absolutely related to what they're having a crisis about, or it can be completely unrelated to what they're having a crisis about. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it does not. All right. So it can be something that's real, or it can be something they imagine. So there's lots of things. So you understand now why it's important to figure out, is this person having a bad day, or are they in crisis? So let's think about a significant other in your life, husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever you have that you have a close relationship with, and you get into an argument with that person. Now, how do arguments usually go? They start over something somebody did wrong, failed to do, the way they said something, or some other kind of thing, and it starts an argument. Now, you start an argument and somebody says something. We use words as weapons. Now we get upset, we turn around, and we're defensive. And then we snap back. And next thing you know, this argument builds up into, it's beyond what it was about. Now it's about hurt feelings, about the terrible thing you said. Why didn't you care? All these kind of things within a relationship can get upset. And we hear this all the time. We say, when you turn around and say to that person who's getting very upset, hey, listen, just calm down. How is that going to go? It's not going to go very well. We know, because that's a moment where a person is in a crisis. In this case, an argument is a small crisis. But you tell somebody to calm down, that's really going to do what? That's going to amp up the situation and make it worse. So we have to understand that a person in crisis does not see the world the same way as someone who's not in crisis. So a person having a bad day, they snap and bark at you, and you bring it up to them. They normally realize, okay, I'm just having a bad day. I didn't mean to snap at you. A person in crisis snaps at you and you bring it up. Hey, knock it off, calm down. What are you being like that for? That can amp them up and keep it going. So the way to look at it is like this. If you think of a red balloon, right, here's a red balloon, and we start to add stress to that person, agitation. They're getting more and more upset. That red balloon is going to start to expand as it fills up with all of this. And at some point, when we put too much air in a balloon, what happens? Pop. And that pop is where the violence usually takes place. So our jobs as individuals and as law enforcement officers is, when we're in the presence of someone who is in that stage where it's growing, is to stop it from going any further and to de-escalate them, to bring that balloon down so that there is no pop, there is no violence. All right. So that's the concept I want you to think about, that balloon blowing up. And as you see somebody getting more and more agitated, more upset, be careful what you say and do, because that can lead to more agitation and blowing up that balloon. And when it pops, there can be violence. And that's what we want to watch out for. So who can be like that? Well, the reality is anybody you come across in your private life or on the job can be in crisis. Sometimes the smartest thing to do is to avoid that. Say you're on a train and you got your family on a train, you're going into the city, you're going to see a play or something, and somebody starts to go off and you can see they're agitated. Now, if they're not actually hurting anybody, they're just screaming and hollering, they're upset, are you going to interact with that person? Well, sometimes the smarter move would be not to interact, get your family and get out of there. If the person starts becoming violent and your family and you are in danger, you may have to interact, right? in your job, you might get sent to a call where someone's going off, and then you have no choice but to interact. So the key to de-escalation is to understand what's going on in the head of the person who's having the crisis, small crisis or the big crisis, so that you know what to say and do, so that you can try and de-escalate that situation, bring the balloon down so that they don't have a problem where they hurt themselves or other people. Right? So de-escalation, that's really the idea of what we're trying to do. And that's why it's needed by everybody in every place people gather. Now, people ask me all the time, well, what if somebody's like an active shooter? Do we de-escalate that? No, you're not going to de-escalate an active shooter. Totally different mindset, totally different problem. You're not going to be talking to an active shooter. They're busy shooting. You're going to run, hide, fight, or whatever else you have to do. But anything short of a shooter, where someone's committing actual violence, anything short of that, where the situation is starting to build into violence, that is when we de-escalate. And the key for de-escalation, again, is there's a couple of techniques we're going to use, and we'll go through them in our next couple of episodes. So I don't want these to be too long. Everybody tells me 10, 15 minutes is perfect. Sometimes I do long form, but I want to make sure that we cover this well. So this is part one of de-escalation, and we'll get the rest of them out to you very, very soon. But remember, I have Blue 360 Media, my publisher. We have a Riot Tint, the maker of awesome safety and security film for schools, businesses everywhere. We have Medical Essential Diagnostics. Right? They don't have a poster. They still didn't get me a poster. They help provide anybody who's in a government job, especially first responders. You can get a health screening for you and two adults at no cost to you and find out, make sure you're healthy to live through this career and get your pension. And our new sponsor, Dubby.gg Energy Drinks. All right. So we'll be back with part two very shortly. But get this in your head where we're going with this. This is very important de-escalation training.